Hello, and welcome to Enhancing Patient Experiences with AI and Cloud Data Management. My name is Richard Kramer, Chief Strategist for Healthcare and Life Sciences with Informatica, and I'm delighted to be joined by Joe Nugent, System VP, Data and Analytics from SSM Health. Welcome, Joe.
Hi, Richard. Thank you for having me.
Very much looking forward to our conversation today. You've done some remarkably exciting things. And as we talked in preparation for this webinar, to me, the most exciting thing is how you were able to deliver value remarkably quickly. And, the key takeaway that I think people should be listening to are the key decisions and the key actions that you and your team took to be able to deliver that value so quickly. So very much looking forward to the presentation today. And with that, I'll let you lead off, Joe.
Sure, and I'm happy to share it, and thank you for the opportunity to be able to share this. We can get into the next slide, and I'll talk about SSM's history briefly. So our mission really centers around, and it serves as our North Star as a healthcare system on how we make decisions. And it's very simple. So through our exceptional healthcare services, we reveal the healing presence of God. The vision, this was just recently modified and changed earlier this year. And one of the biggest things that we were trying to do is how do we make it more inclusive for the people that we serve, as well as the people that work for us. So it's peace, hope, and health for every person, family, and community, especially those most in need. And that last piece was there was a lot of discussion, and we wanted to make sure that it resonated with everybody, but it also was inclusive of the population that we see every day and we serve as the underserved. Our values really is straightforward. It's compassion, respect, excellence, and stewardship and community in everything that we do. One of the things that we also believe is we're only a piece of the solution. It's really the communities and the people that once we bring everything together, that's how we are able to serve our mission. Next slide, please. So SSM, this is just a quick overview. We are a $9.3 billion not-for-profit Catholic healthcare system. We serve 4 states. It's Wisconsin, Illinois, Missouri, and Oklahoma. We provide $464 million in community benefits. We employ roughly 40,000 people. We also have 13,000 providers and physicians and 300 plus physician offices and outpatient sites. We also run 23 hospitals, 13 post-acute facilities, as well as serve 58 counties in our region. On top of that, we serve 900 million members across all of our states. 5,200 of those lives are covered by Dean Health Plan. 33 of those are managed hospitals and affiliate relationships that we have that we feel are just an extension of SSM. And we do nearly 23,000 visits virtually today.
And Joe, I think, as we talk about your story and how it's relevant, this really establishes that you're as complex an organization as anybody, and the need to deliver any solution you deliver at scale clearly is a big part of your charter, right?
100%. And one of the things that's unique with SSM is we're not only vertically integrated, how you would traditionally think of a manufacturing company and a business vertically integrating their supply chain. We're also very horizontally integrated as well. And that's how do we take supplies to the locations, provide the services that we need, but then also extend out our reach to provide additional services that you wouldn't consider traditional healthcare services, essentially. So one of the ways in which we do this is we're creating an ecosystem of care, is what we call that. So we know as a healthcare system, we don't have the ability to fund all of these vertical and horizontal integrations. And so what we do as a healthcare system is to say, hey, what are the gaps in our care? What are the gaps in the things that we do today, where we can provide better healthcare to our patients? And what we have kind of focused on is how do we start to create partnerships in those spaces who are the best at what they do. So best in class in their space. How does SSM then leverage that relationship to provide that care to our patient set? So in this slide, you're seeing just a few of our JVs, a few of our investments, a few of our, we basically use any type of legal structure partnerships, for example, to say what's the best way that both entities can be better at what they do, become more competitive in the market, but serve a broader clientele or patient stack.
Joe, when you look at this community, this ecosystem of care, right, and it's a fantastic way to extend into the full patient journey without having to do it all yourself. How much of these relationships is you inventing a new style of working together with these partners versus how many of them are you doing something that's ordinary and you're just taking advantage of a relationship that they've done with other organizations as well?
Yeah, so SSM, this is the interesting thing about SSM, and this is why I came to SSM personally. SSM looks at this in a way with a different lens. If it's the right thing to do, is one of the criteria that we look at. Will it benefit humanity or our environment or how we do things as a business or improve the industry of healthcare in general? The answer is yes, we will do it. The other half of it is, will it move the needle enough and align with our philosophies? If those other two criteria are a yes, then the answer is yes, SSM will do it as well. We're not in the market of trying to say, hey, how do we make marginal successes? We know healthcare is in a place where it needs some innovation and it needs a lot of change. And so we're looking at innovative, novel solutions where we need to employ them, but we're also looking at stability as well as how do we make the industry better at what they do in general, right? So
very much mission driven.
Yes, very much so. So this next slide, in this next section, I just wanted to kind of walk through kind of what it is that us or myself on a daily basis is trying to solve in healthcare. And that really is the easiest, or the this probably is a little bit oversimplistic and a lot vague, but and very broad, but it's really how do we improve the continuum of care, generally speaking. Next slide. So if you look at the continuum of care and where it starts and where it ends, we start with a patient. And what are those patient behaviors that we have to solve or answer so that we can say, hey, are we the right healthcare provider? While we want to say that for everybody, there are times when SSM is not the right healthcare provider, and that's okay. Really, in the end, what we're trying to do is to say, hey, you as a patient, here's what we found. So what is the best way that we can help you, whether it's inside or outside of our healthcare system, for you to get the care that you need and the outcomes that you would like. So we look at patient behaviors. How do patients choose a healthcare provider? Why do patients stay or leave a healthcare provider in a healthcare system? And what is the patient rate for satisfaction of those services? On the flip side, we look at our employees and our healthcare workers and say, how do our healthcare workers interact with that patient? How do those providers and employees choose a healthcare system to work for? And why do providers leave a healthcare system? And are our services strong enough where our providers and healthcare professionals are referring patients to specialists internal? Or is it something that we need to improve as a healthcare system and where we need to grow ourselves? So all of this connects, and part of that, and this is only part of the journey, how does all of this journey then connect to each other? Next slide, please. And so if you start to drill further down, you look at the quality and safety of things. What are our lines of businesses? Where do we excel? What lines of businesses need improvement and investment? How do we improve what is needed in those lines of services? Because we're doing well on a line of service today, it doesn't mean we will be doing well tomorrow in it, because the industry changes so fast and science changes so fast. And how are we connecting to our community-based programs to improve efficacy rates, right? We as a healthcare system, we know we can only do so much in a clinical setting. There are a lot of cases where right now behavioral health is a very big topic in healthcare. Those things need support, and those individuals need support outside of the clinical setting. So how do we provide those support services to those individuals? And then we start to look at operational excellence and financial performance. It's really, how do we continue to stay a business and fund the things that we want to fund so that we can continue our mission? So how are locations performing? How is the healthcare performing against payer contracts that we are tied to? How are we performing against government funded programs? What experiences are really good, and what can we learn from them and take them into other lines of businesses to recreate them? So all of these questions are all unknowns, and these are all questions that they're very specific to the domain and the topic at hand, but these are things that we struggle with in the for-profit world and the nonprofit world. Next slide. This diagram really shows us, this is the first use case that we decided to take on, and that was, how do we increase the accuracy of our provider records? The first thing we had to do was decide, what is a provider? Is that a DO? Is it a PRN? Is it that was one of the things that I have learned was, while we all think we understand what a provider is, we had to coalesce around what as a health system do we care what a provider is, and get everybody on the same definition. So that was one of the things that we looked at. What is the primary care physician? What does that person do to qualify as a primary care physician? That was another kind of layer of definition that we needed to create. And then as you go further to the right, it's how is that providers, and to a lesser extent, private PCP, what certifications do they have? What ministries are they tied to? And ministries is locations, and that's how we refer to it as at SSM. What ministries are they tied to? What departments are they tied to? And then how do we say, as a health system, here are all the providers and services that we provide? Healthcare is a very personal thing, and it is for me as well. I want to get to know who my providers are, who I'm working with to look after my health and to guide me on my health journey as well. So how do we make that very accurate so that each patient has that opportunity to empower themselves to say, hey, these are the people that I want working with me to care for myself and my family and my loved ones.
So Joe, if you look at, where you started with continuum of care being the overarching area that you were focused on, how did you choose, this idea of a provider master or a find a doctor solution as the right place to start?
Yeah, so one of the things to us, or the way I thought about it, is to say, okay, what are the key components in a healthcare journey? And one of those was provider. The other side is the patient side. For provider, what we can do, we can look at some are our employees and some are our affiliates and some are part of those relationships that we talked about earlier. The data is there. We really just needed to understand, how do we need to cleanse the data, connect the data, build the metadata around the data, to say, how do we take care of our providers? Because the environment in which we work in healthcare is, it's understaffed. So how do we take care of our providers, but how do we also provide them the ability to do the things that they love in their life, as far as work is concerned, and empower them to say, hey, this is what I can do, open those doors for them to manage their schedule and their patient load as they need. And so that all of those things kind of played a factor on why we started with provider first. I can say patient, the reason why we started with provider versus patient is those same relationships, but that data is much, much larger and it takes much more time. The other half of that, starting with provider, builds the foundation for us to get to patient and all of the journeys in between to get to patient.
And I think there are a couple of things that you described in there, right? That you're going to learn things and get good at things doing provider that will help make your patient implementation faster. But then the other piece that was intriguing in what you were saying is lots of organizations know that there's physician burnout and clinical staff burnout.
Yep.
And you've made that a centerpiece
Yep.
of this particular initiative. And so can you talk a little bit about, certainly you can see how the provider finder improves the patient experience. How about making life better, the work-life balance better for clinicians and staff?
Yeah, so I'm going to use a simple example, and I'll probably refer back to this example. So like, if you take the simple, just the simple challenge of when does a patient move from one unit to another unit in a clinical setting, that then says, okay, so that patient now has left that unit, moved into another unit, which trickles down to, okay, we now have an available bed, which means, okay, if we have an available bed, how do we identify the right patient to come stay in that bed? That would receive the most benefit, but then also how do you staff your team correctly, dependent on the capacity of the beds and actual in-bed residents. But then that also allows us to flex our staff between locations, schedule it better, and be able to actually flex. This week you may work more hours, but next week we can start to like trail it down to offset the hours previously. But then that also, there's a ratio between bedside care versus providers and physicians, right? So now that we know that, what is that ratio and how do we make sure that ratio is in check when we have an influx of patients, for example, or a decrease of patients, but an influx in another location. So the more that we can give that insight to our providers and our employees, the better they can plan their schedule, and the better that they can start to load balance it, to say, hey, this is what a sane working day looks like versus a very busy day looks like. So yes.
And being able to do all of those things accurately that will involve AI and machine learning requires first and foremost an accurate provider master.
100%. And if we wanted to take it into like supply chain, because a patient left, that means now that location needs the meds that that patient has to take, right? Do we have the supplies there? Is it so specific that it needs to be mixed on site, or is it just a prescription that a person can take? So like, it's this. You think about, okay, we have an open bed. It's a very simple idea, but there's a lot of planning and logistics around that open bed and the person that potentially will fill that bed in that unit, essentially. So
exactly right.
Mm-hmm. So next piece is I'd like to walk through SSM's journey of data analytics. This is the piece that I led and am currently leading. So I might get a little bit too excited and chatty, but that's okay. One of the biggest challenges that I faced coming into this was cultural changes. Healthcare, just like any other industry, they have their cultures, how they've always done things. And really, I started to move my teams and the leadership team that I work with to say, hey, we got to get to more value-driven use cases. At the rate that industry is changing, health and healthcare, as well as the technology is changing, we cannot wait to implement something 2 or 3 years from now. This is something that people need today, just like the example that we just discussed, Richard. So it's how do we get immediate outcomes? How do we significantly start to move the needle and very quickly? And you're probably starting to recognize the repeat and topics and our beliefs from the partnership slide, right? So it's like, if we're going to look at that in our partnerships, then we need to look internally and say, hey, are we in a place where we can actually start to adopt those things very quickly? And so that took me back to the next point, is to start to adopt modernization and technology, right? And the philosophies of it. So we went straight into Agile. I had a lot of conversations with my existing leaders, and I said, hey, does everybody know what Agile is? And the answer was yes. And so they walked me through it. And what I found is they had cherry picked the theories of Agile and created more overhead, more meetings. When the complaint was there were too many meetings. And I was like, okay, so we reset, we started to embrace it, and started to transform. The other things I brought in was microservices and API forward. Today, that's how we do things. And that's what we've been doing for the last 8 to 10 years in technology. The question is, microservices are the standard today, but tomorrow we don't know what's going to come out. And will it be microservices, right? So the question, really, how I've built this team is to say, hey, we can be flexible enough to, no matter what, whether we're working with legacy, modern technologies, we can adapt the technology to the need. The other half drives up to the first point, MVPs. Decide on an MVP 3 to 6 months, and start to iterate very quickly based upon actual user feedback, and then infrastructure as a code. So those dot points is how we refer to them. Those have been key to like SSM and myself being able to drive out the values that we are seeing using Informatica's full set.
Well, and I know, Joe, we had chatted, just a few minutes ago, right? And it's funny when you bring up Agile, right? Okay, everybody's on board with Agile, and then the next breath, they're asking you for your 3-year plan.
Yes, 100%. But here's the thing, Agile is not an excuse to do anything you want. That's what they were doing when I came in. Agile is, hey, we're adults. Let's sit down, get the right people around the right table and say, this is the problem. How are we going to solve it, and start unblocking ourselves? That's really what it is. So.
But I also think, right, you have to, it's great to get people to buy into Agile, but then you actually need to deliver value quickly to earn the right to keep doing Agile.
100%. Yeah. And so that's the trick that we all live in, is how do we get the funding for the things that we need to do, right? And to do that, in my case, my experience is it's outcomes. If you're delivering outcomes that are expected and wanted, they will continue to fund those things. But if you're saying, hey, you're building something and it's going to take 3 years and people don't actually know what the outcome is and you cannot touch and feel it, that's a harder sell every subsequent year. So the other thing we looked at was the technical foundation. So, and this is where Informatica came in. We struggled with this for a little bit. And it was data standardization. How do we start to define ingestion patterns and use of data with the egress and ingress? And then what is an enterprise-wide solution for governance, to be quite honest with you? We've tried a lot of different ones. We did a lot of POCs, and we landed on Informatica. By no influence was Informatica a part of the decision, to be quite honest. We POC'd a lot of different vendors, and this, quite honestly, Informatica is best in class, and that's what we needed to do. The other half was redesign the data platform for scalability. And then as we start to enhance data, how do we start to enable that data, and how to enable the usage of that data enhancement? So while we were building our architecture out, data mesh as a term did not exist 2 years ago. Somehow we stumbled into building it ended up being the data mesh. So one of the things that we 100% focused on was how do we solve domain data availability. So the same data that our 36 clinical programs use is not the same data that the financial teams use. And so when we started architecting this, the idea was, how do we get the data that each specific group needs and enable them to do the jobs that they need to do without opening a ticket to another team? We kind of settled on our core technologies, which is Azure Data Lake, the Azure Data Factories, Databricks, and Informatica's Intelligent Management Cloud. Really, those are the core of our technologies, and any new technologies, as we decide that there is a use case for it and bring it in, it will need to work and integrate with these core technologies. Next slide. So we have strategic partners that we talked about earlier. These are my strategic partners, and you don't need a lot of them. What you do need are partners who are willing to work with you and go on the journey with you to learn how you do these things that there's no playbook to build these things. So for us, it's Informatica, it's InfoVerity, it's Databricks, and it's Microsoft. And the way we pick those partners, it's not just a vendor client relationship. It's us sitting in a room saying, hey, we have a problem with all of these partners, to say, how do we solve those things? So like an example of this that has just come up recently is we've been working with Informatica on CDGC, scanning our stored procedures, our SQL databases, everything that we can possibly scan. We found a bug. We communicated to the team at Informatica. They did a release in less than a month that fixed it, but then we found another bug. But welcome to technology. But that's how we learn. That's how we build. That's how we evolve. We do it together, and both parties benefit. Ideally, in the world that I live in, my vision is all parties benefit on this slide, including SSM, to move everything forward.
Yeah, and I think Joe, right? That's the nature of a partnership more than simply being a vendor, right? Is that we genuinely are in the boat with you. We share your values and we share the importance of the work that you're doing, and we're committed to being successful together. And that's very different than simply selling you software.
Yeah, and the other half of this is, I would say, so technology brought us together, but 80% of our conversations is not about technology. It's about roadmaps and where we're heading and the horizon, the problems and what we want to solve together. And then the technology comes in to say, okay, let's define out what we're trying to solve. So that's really where, to me, in my experience, it's not the value. The value is in the experience, the wide experience that I can never have and my team can never get without working in that industry, right? So like, instead of doing that, let's lean on our partners to do that. And we can provide the information from our side that we're seeing in. Together, we can build a better solution. So
exactly right. And as you said, I mean, part of our enthusiasm for our partnership is the problems that you're addressing, the solutions you're building aren't just for SSM Health. Right. These are almost universal challenges in healthcare at home.
100%.
So the types of solutions we work on together, and with your help, make our products better and more capable in solving those problems. You know, a rising tide lifts all healthcare boats.
Agreed. So, yeah, and quite honestly, not just healthcare, right? All industries. So. This is just our simple architecture slide of what we've built. On the left side, you see our source systems. Most of them are probably familiar. Everyone's probably familiar with those vendors. We use Databricks, or I'm sorry, Azure Data Factory to ingest. It goes into our data lake, the Azure Data Lake. That's where we have storage. We cleanse the data. We also use Databricks for the interaction layer. And then we use, again, data factory to tie into Informatica's platform. On the right side, what you see is kind of our vision of domain-specific data, serving domain-specific data, and enabling self-service. So instead of one giant warehouse or data lake where you have a warehouse where people are starting to try to tie data together, what we want to do is pull all the specific data together and get the SMEs to tie the data together. We can build the data model, and it alleviates us trying to solve for like financial problems that we don't know, quite honestly, right? So finance will help us with their SMEs and tell us what is their trade secret or secret sauce. We will build out the data model, and that data model will be available for all finance teams across all of our regions.
Now, for this architecture, Joe, were you replacing something that had already been built that was serving this function and you just made it modern and better? Or was this a net new capability for the enterprise?
So the answer is both. I inherited a lot of things that were supposed to serve this need. As we start to take a look at their architecture, it would not fulfill the need. So we took on the challenge of building something net new from scratch, and how we wanted to use, what were the use cases to drive the architecture for this technology solution, for lack of better words. We really worked with our business partners to say, what is it that you're struggling with? What are the concerns that you have? What is it that you think your organization is going to need in the future? And that defined out this architecture that we're looking at right here. Most of the existing architecture that we have, more than likely, there is a plan in flight to move that data into this architecture and consolidate everything into one single place.
And with Databricks, of course, platform of choice for advanced analytics and predictive modeling and AI. So this is serving those use cases and those workloads?
Yeah, 100%. So the way that we built this architecture is we can plug and unplug anything that we need. So like if a new technology comes out tomorrow, or if Databricks comes out with an enhancement tomorrow, we can 100% leverage it almost immediately. So it's a very modular system, how we built it. I am not naive to think that the 4 partners that we have will always be 4 partners. So, and no offense to you, Richard, but one of the things that we have to accept and acknowledge is technology is moving very quickly. Like generative AI it was kind of a squeak in the industry last year. It's got a loud voice this year. But once we identify the use cases and the right places to apply generative AI, how do we then start to connect it to what we've already built to enhance the serve side of this diagram? So.
Yeah, makes complete sense.
Yep. All right, so now we've gone through a lot of the history, why I did what I did, where we are today, and probably the most important part is, what's the business value? What are we getting out of all of this? So if you look at the work that we did, so we started our provider journey, CDGC, as well as MDM in August of 2021. We completed that piece in April 1st of 2020. Wait, was it 2021? I misspoke. August of 2022, because otherwise it would have taken 13 months, not 8. We completed it on April 1st of 2023. It took 8 months of time. The immediate benefits that we saw 30 days out from that was significantly increased the accuracy of provider records. We also streamlined the process to add providers as well as put them in the right departments, for lack of better words, and how do we associate other data to it. That was a very manual process. It included 6 different teams, and the turnaround process to include or to add a new provider or change a record was 6 to 8 weeks. That's something that we can do in minutes now. Deduplication of provider records. So on average in our system, our providers, there were 11 records for them. We are down to one single golden record. And then also automation of valid medical certification and validation of those things, as well as validation of providers to ministry and that relationship of ministries to departments across SSM. We're looking at the near-term benefits, which is in flight right now. So we're in the 30 to 60 day time frame. We're looking at automating provider hierarchies. So we have hierarchies of providers depending on what their affiliations are, to medical groups, as well as to their departments, and their certifications and their credentials. So that drives the compensation piece, and it also drives the performance measures. All of those things are done manually today on multiple lists. So there's not one list of one single list of provider hierarchy. There are actually 4 of them that I am aware of.
But Joe, I think it's worth, just let's go back a couple of minutes to this is 8 months.
Yes.
And at its core, this is master data management.
Mm-hmm.
For folks who have been in the industry for a while, master data management is typically one of those very lengthy, takes years, trust me, we're going to get to value eventually sort of process. And the idea that you were able to implement this in 8 months in production, delivering value is somewhat shocking. And certainly part of that is cloud, right? You don't have to worry about provisioning servers and all of that. But there's also an enormous cultural piece and an enormous governance piece that is it's people and process, not just the tools.
Right. And all of those things have to align, right? So if I take the example of we have 12,800 providers, multiply that by 11, those were the number of records that we were trying to sort through to do our jobs, essentially. And when the proposal came, it was like, I'd like to see it, right? I'll believe it when I see it. That's 100% the answer that I got all of the time. But here's the thing, like, if you're thinking about 6 teams, 6 to 8 weeks to update one provider record, and the number of hundreds of hours that we're putting into that to support 13,000 providers, we're doing the work. We're just focusing in the wrong place, is what I would say. So it was.
What's the business sponsor that really provided the oomph to let you make all of the, inevitably the hard, difficult choices, the changes, the people, the process? Who was the end customer for this?
Yeah, the end customer was all across the board. So it involved the CFO. It also involved the chief strategy officer, as well as the chief growth officer who owns digital and strategy and marketing. It also included the COO, or operations leader, because those were the people that were doing the manual touches. And then it also included, I forgot, our clinical leader as well, our CCO, because it was their office, their back-end staff that was validating all of the medical certifications and things of that nature. So all of those people had to be in alignment. And really, quite honestly, it was, so we did a quick demo of it as we were building it out. And that's one of the things that we adopted in Agile was, you can't go into a hole and just start building things for the next 8 months. You have to actually show it to them to get the feedback. So going into the demo, when we were like, yeah, so someone just changed the record in the source system. It's flowing through in 5 minutes. And everybody was like, it was silence. It was, no one actually had a comment or a question. It was more of surprised that we could actually do something like this. And this is something that we can do. We just need to help them understand why we weren't able to do it previously. So.
Nothing short of amazing.
Yeah. It was all the teams, to be quite honest with you. I just funded. So if you look at the future benefits, again, this is one of the reasons why we landed on Informatica in your teams, Richard, we're not looking for short-term gains. 8 months is a drop in the bucket of what we're trying to do. If you look back at all of the content that we looked at, as well as the continuum of care, what we're looking at is we started at provider. Now we're looking at ministries. What is it that the ministries need? So capacity planning, flexible staff, medical supplies, pharmaceutical supplies, what specialties are there? What vendors are tied to a ministry? And how do we better manage that? PCPs, we talked a little bit about it and the affiliations they have, but referrals, patient loads, patient cohorts, and performance. And then the patient side is the diagnosis, the treatments. Are they getting what they need? Are they seeing the specialists that they need to see? The prescriptions, for example. So one of the things that I've learned coming into healthcare is there is a very low rate of people filling their prescriptions and actually taking their prescriptions. It's in the 60% range that people actually do follow through with their prescriptions. And how do we address that, for example? And then the last piece is claims. Are patients eligible for treatments under their healthcare provider or their insurance? What treatments do they need? What procedures do they need? What is the quality and the safety that we are providing? And what is their satisfaction to those things? One of the things, and another, I don't know if it's a fun fact, but it's a fact. One of the things that I learned is the mortality rate in a ministry or a location is primarily driven by the delay of care. It's not because we can't find the problem. It's when did we find the problem and what is the timeline for us to be able to action that issue, for example. Given the workloads and the staff shortages, that timeline has started to compress. So the sooner that we can identify a patient has an issue or is experiencing an episode, the faster that we can provide treatment and significantly decrease the risk of mortality.
And Joe, I think that, coming back to the overarching theme of our discussion today, right, is where can AI and machine learning, and perhaps more specifically, generative AI, start to really move the needle? And certainly in each one of these future benefits, we can see advanced analytics, accessible, trustworthy, fit for purpose data, feeding some very sophisticated AI models, making recommendations, next best actions, and getting those to the point of care, right? To the point of interaction where your staff can actually move the needle. And the example that you just provided, I mean, is a picture perfect example of an opportunity. If we have the data and we believe the data to train some models, we can make a substantive difference with AI in compressing that timeline as you described.
Right. Yeah. And that's the challenge, right? So this is more of a list of use cases is what I would say. I don't know. And I don't think I could ever answer how do we solve all of these things all at one time. And I don't think anybody can, but it's really how do we use what's available to us today from a technology landscape or from any type of landscape to say, how do we enable better decisions and better care? And we will solve each of these one at a time. That's the goal, and that's my goal in life at this point in time. So yeah.
But it's a gathering storm, right? Yeah. Because if you take your approach of data mesh, empowering business and clinical areas to create and serve their own data products based upon the platform that you've developed.
Yep.
The fact that you now have provider as trustworthy, you have location as trustworthy, that you're governing and curating, specific domains and assets, those then become enablers if you had to pick your way through and you and your team were responsible for solving each one of these, we'd be having this conversation a decade from now.
100%. Yep.
But when you're enabling the enterprise in a disciplined manner to address these problems and develop and publish products that then can build and be consumed by others, then the more you do, the faster you go. And that's the real power of your approach, I think.
Yeah, I think part of that is to say, where is everybody's strengths, right? Technologists are not going to be able to answer the same questions a cardiologist work group might be able to answer. But the cardiologist will not be able to implement the technical solution. So what is the problem that those cardiologists are trying to solve? Let us come in with the technology and advise and say, hey, this is what we think we need to do to answer your question, and make it repeatable and predictable, and learn from your experiences, right? And this goes into the generative AI. We're going to have good and bad days, but we should always learn from them, and provide that experience to the next provider, so they're not having to learn through experience themselves. So
exactly right.
That is the end of my presentation. So thank you for the time, Richard.
Well, enjoy the conversation, Joe. Now I'm just going to take a few minutes and share, the Informatica perspective on how we supported your journey and achieving what you were able to achieve. And, I start with the whole idea that your journey and what you described as what you've done and where you're going really is a story of digital transformation, right? And how can we make things better, faster, and more cost effective by moving from manually intensive processes to digital processes, many of which are fueled by AI and ML. And your example of a simple physician update is a perfect example of the just stunning efficiencies that are available if you take this approach.
I agree, 100%.
And when we started our engagement, we really did start our discussion together around your mission and the business imperatives of healthcare, and what was it that was most important first for SSM Health. And these are our standard 6 that I think are available, right? I recall our first conversation where we had this conversation on business imperatives and said, so Joe, which one of these are important? He said, they're all important.
Yes.
and clearly they are. But
Yeah.
we really did narrow in on, improving work life of clinicians and staff as being a key ingredient, as well as enhancing the consumer experience, right? Those seem to be those two bookends that resonated first in the use case that you described. And that was a conversation that we had together.
Yes, 100%. And one of the things that I would add is population health is a term that everybody will hear. It's how do we care for individuals equitably, and that's really the key to it. Is how do we say, instead of the things that we have always done, how do we make sure that everybody is taken care of well instead of okay?
Yeah, and that's the power of digital, right? Because historically, population health, we focus on the 5 most expensive conditions, and we focus on those because we're able to apply case managers and at-home nursing, and we can do all these expensive manual things. Mm-hmm. Because the conditions we pick are so expensive that we can still show a return. But to your point, that's neither equitable nor broad enough or makes a big enough difference. Yes. If you take the idea of a digital transformation, now you can do it for so many more people in so many more settings at so much greater efficiency. And one of the things I know we've chatted about that wasn't part of your presentation was the whole hospital at home initiative that you've described, right? And if you want to talk about something that's mind-numbingly complicated, it's how do you take a hospital care experience and do that and provide that in the patient's home, where the patient's happier, their family's happier, the care is arguably better because hospitals are dangerous places for infection. You can't even consider doing that if it's not digital.
I agree.
Right?
Yep.
And so this was part of the conversation that we had, again, getting to your use case. Let's talk about those business imperatives. Let's identify the use cases that matter, and let's focus there. And again, as your partner, this is a conversation we wanted to have with you, right? We don't just want to sell you software. We want to make sure that we understand your use cases so that you're using the software to best benefit to get to value quickly.
Mm-hmm.
If we think of, the data community as it historically has lived, it's been those people in the middle, the data engineers, the ETL developers, the data ops engineers. And certainly the story that you've told, Joe, is consistent with what we're seeing across the industry, which it's no longer those people who are hands-on data practitioners who are the only people who need to be involved and use data in the enterprise to get to value. And this really speaks to that example of your future use cases. That's not the people in the middle who are going to solve those future use cases, right?
Yeah.
It's the people outside that and even outside them that we need to service.
Yeah, and it's accelerating, is what I would say. So I've only been in the healthcare industry for a short stint, but the time that I've been in healthcare, it's accelerating at a very quick pace. It's catching up with the for-profit industries, is what I would say. But to me, this is the way that I kind of like to look at this slide, Richard, is I like to call it the constellation of data, because that's really what it is, right?
It absolutely is. And then, if we think, what are the capabilities that you need to array to enable these people to use data and get value from it? And, very quickly, you need to know what data you have and what it means, which, because the old days of physically centralizing, controlling all of your data as a path to value, I'd argue that never really worked that well in the past. And it can't work in today's distributed data environment. You need to be able to access and integrate that data and move it to where it needs to be. You need to be able, we talked about getting those insights and connecting systems and applications and automating business processes for efficiency, getting those insights to the point of interaction with a team member or with a patient, being able to cleanse and trust the data. Right? Being able, and data doesn't need to be perfect to be useful, but the ultimate egregious thing is to use bad quality data and not know that it's bad quality, right? There are situations where data can be good enough, but you need to know. And then there are situations where the data just has to be right? If you're cross-matching blood, if you're making prescriptions, you're having a med list, right? There are a lot of places where we just need to make sure the data is right. And even something like provider records in your situation.
I would argue that centralized data has never worked. I think it's just a dream is what somebody had, and we decided to go down that path because we didn't know any better, but we now know that data will always be distributed. So how do we make it work for us?
Yeah, exactly right. I mean, the data silos are, I've been doing this for 30 years. Mm-hmm. Data silos are bad. We must break down the data silos and move the data together. It's like we have more data silos now than we had 30 years ago. It's like, just accept that that's a nature of the problem.
100%. Yeah.
And master and relate, core capability to the solution that you pick, not simply mastering your providers, knowing you're going to do your patients, but doing your consumers, your citizens, your employees, and the relationships between them. So much of what you described, Joe, of the potential future value is knowing who a provider is, what their licenses are, who the patients are, where they practice, right? To do all of that magic of AI, to do getting the right provider with the right patient at the right acuity of care, all of those things, you have to have mastered and related it as a starting point.
Yes.
We talked a lot about governing and protecting, and then sharing, democratizing, the idea of a data marketplace for all of these certified data products to be easily findable by that constellation of data consumers as you described it.
Yep.
So all of those capabilities really are what we think is required to be successful, and shouldn't come as a shock that those capabilities are what the Informatica Intelligent Data Management Cloud provides. And our suggestion for this is that you need all of those capabilities to solve the sorts of complex, meaningful problems that we have in healthcare or in any industry, Joe, as you described. And not only that, but you want them to all be part of a common platform so they're built to work together. And you don't need to spend your scarce, expensive, valuable talent integrating tools together, right? The fact that the tools are built to work together and your staff can simply use them and spend their time on getting to value is a huge part of the value of the platform, which hopefully you're realizing in your 8-month implementation.
Yeah, I think one of the interesting questions that I got when we started this journey internally was someone who asked me, said, when we implement this, what changes? Well, how does it change my work? My answer was, it doesn't change how you do your work. It makes it easier to do your work. You do your work through the same interfaces that you would always use. We don't add another tool on top of it. This is all on the back end that's trying to cleanse and clean everything to make it accurate. So you just do the things that you do. What we're going to do is make the checklist that you follow and the number of checklists dwindle down, and you continue to use the tools that you use, which is actually really one of the harder parts, is to get people adopting a new tool set, because you have to train them. You also have to educate them. What's right, what's wrong. They can just use whatever they already use.
Yeah, exactly right. And then the final piece, we've spent a bit of time talking about AI and ML, and in healthcare we very traditionally think of the clinical or the business use cases for AI and ML, but from Informatica, we absolutely important. We love to support those with accessible, trustworthy, fit for purpose data. But within Informatica, we also apply AI and machine learning to the tasks of data management. And we do that with our CLAIRE metadata intelligence and automation, right? That's our AI engine that says, based on everything we know from the metadata that we see across all of our customers using the platform, how do we make the everyday tasks of data management faster, easier, and more automated, right? Can we recommend a transformation, a data quality rule? Can we categorize data that you've cataloged automatically so that we can reduce the burden of the more routine data management tasks, so that, again, your skilled, expensive staff can focus on the complicated things that they really need their expertise for. So this is the Informatica Intelligent Data Management Cloud. It's the centerpiece of our technology partnership and how we work together.
I'm going to jump in real quick with a funny for you, Richard.
All right.
My data governance team, and I've never heard anybody say this, so we built a data governance team that uses CDGC. The feedback I got from the tool once we implement it was, I love CDGC. I'm like, okay, I don't think I've ever had somebody declare their love for a platform, but it's acceptable. So,
well, given the history of data governance as just a domain, that anybody who is enthusiastic about data governance, and particularly our service, will gladly embrace.
Yeah, so I thought you would like to know that as well.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Joe. Very much appreciate the conversation. Any parting shots, any parting thoughts, key takeaways you would like to share with the audience?
I think the only thing I would ask as anybody goes down this journey, and Richard, you and I have talked about it, don't limit your imagination. I think once somebody starts to limit the scope, or because of the challenges, it starts to change the solution, and it changes what the future benefits would be. And so I know you and I had a lot of conversations when we started this journey together, and I probably was very idealistic on the problems that I wanted to solve. But you have to be idealistic about some of these things. And you have to say, hey, some of these things you can't compromise on, you can't cut corners on. And what in this, the topic that we discussed today, to get us to a place where AI and generative AI can help us make better decisions, I would suggest do not cut corners. Because the data and the information you're going to get is only as good as the data that you feed it.
And Joe, your statement is it is so critically important that people hear what you said, because I've been doing this for 35 years. There is an enormous amount of learned helplessness within the industry, because so much of this has been so hard, bordering on impossible for so long, that our business and clinical customers have been conditioned to hearing, no, that can't be done, no, that's too expensive, no, that's too difficult, that in many cases they've stopped asking.
Yes.
And I think one of the things that we need to do, and one of the things that I communicate whenever I have the chance, is with the tools, with AI, with the cloud, with all of the things that are arrayed in front of us, if you can imagine doing it with data today,
Yep.
It can in fact be done. And it can in fact be done in 8 months.
Yes. Yeah. But right? It's interesting because when I had talked to some people that I know in the industry and some of our vendors and described it as we were trying to figure out who our strategic partners were, it wasn't once that I heard this. It's impossible to do that, and good luck doing it. That's what I heard repeatedly. And we did it. So what is the excuse now, I guess?
But it is coming from outside healthcare, right? Mm-hmm. You didn't have that 30 years of learned helplessness. Yeah. You saw nothing but the value in solving the problem, mm-hmm. and you went about solving it.
Yep.
And some fresh thinking and all of that's what's required, because so many of us have spent so long trying and failing that mm-hmm. we just don't want to try again. And so, try again, do it differently.
Yeah, I was going to say, my advice is pick it up now. Now is the time to do it. Don't give up, for lack of better words. Yeah. So. Yeah,
focus on a use case, expect to get to value quickly, iterate.
Yep.
Right. All right. Well, Joe, thank you so much. Very much appreciate your partnership. I appreciate what you and your team are doing to advance healthcare. And really appreciate the opportunity to have this conversation with you today.
Thank you, Richard. Thank you for having me.
And as I leave our audience, we are going to have Informatica is going to be having another conversation with our customer, Boehringer Ingelheim, who's really doing some interesting things in life sciences around commercial operations and compliance. That's going to be on August 30th at 10 a.m. Pacific time. So if you enjoyed hearing from Joe and I today, we've got another customer telling a great story on August 30th, and look forward to hearing everybody there. With that, Joe and I will sign off. Thank you again, Joe.